Hi, welcome back. I'm Jenny Noonan, Director of Policy Analysis and Communications at EPA's Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards. Welcome to the second half of our broadcast, Climate and Air Quality, Applications for Air Quality Professionals. Thank you so much for sending in your questions, and if you still would like to send in questions for the second half of our show, please call 1-888-228-6736. And in addition to that, we've gotten wonderful questions already, especially about the specific tools that have been mentioned in today's broadcast. And I want to mention that that materials and more information are available on our website, which is www.epa.gov/APTI. So if you'd like to download the slides from any of the presentations today, that's where they are. And in addition to that, if you'd like to download this entire broadcast, it will be available in about a week at that same website. So let's turn to our panel. Let me introduce our second panel today. I'd like to start with Denise Mulholland. And Denise is the Senior Program Manager for the U.S. EPA Clean Energy Environment State Partnership Program. Welcome.
Thanks, Jenny.
Secondly, we have Laura McKelvey. She is the Group Leader for Community and Programs Tribal Group at the Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards. And then I'm pleased to be joined by Jim Yarborough, who is the Regional Team Lead in Region 6, which is in Dallas, and he is in charge of the Dallas Sustainable Skylines Initiative program for EPA. So thank you all for being here today. One of the themes that has evolved throughout the second half of the broadcast has been really describing the linkages between energy, climate, air quality, and transportation. And I'd like to start with a question for each of you to describe how the program that you're working on, whether it's Sustainable Skylines or working with Connecticut, would fit into that pattern of linkages. And I'd like to start with you, Denise. I know that you've worked closely with Connecticut, and Gina McCarthy described a lot of what has been going on in Connecticut. How have the themes of energy, climate, and air quality and transportation all been played out in Connecticut and some of the other programs you work on?
Well, the program that I work on is the Clean Energy Environment Programs, and we work with state and local governments across the U.S., and we're really working with them to try and better integrate their energy, environment, and economic planning, because we really see those three issues as complementary issues that you don't need to sacrifice one for the other, and yet we see it in the states and at the local level that often energy, environment, and economic planning activities are done separately. So what we do is we work with state and local governments across the U.S. and we help them learn from each other. We help them learn best practices and models that they can replicate in their own states or localities as to how they can achieve the multiple benefits of integrating energy, environment, and economic planning. So, for example, you may have some states that will do their environmental plans and they don't actually pay attention to the job benefits, but then they may then find that they'll have more allies if they're able to promote the economic benefits of some of their investments and demonstrate that there are job growth opportunities from these environmental plans. We work with the states and the localities to help them identify what those synergies are and what those multiple benefits are through our tools, our best practice examples, and through opportunities for peer exchange.
Laura?
Thanks, Jenny. Well, my group is the Community and Tribal Programs Group, and we work with the tribes, municipalities, place-based communities across the country to help identify their own needs and concerns and bring the right tools to them to address their programs and their issues and their needs. And with air quality planning, energy efficiency, land use planning, transportation, and air quality, they're all linked. And so what we're trying to do is go through the grassroots and work with the needs of the individual community, city, tribal government to help them identify the needs that they have and then bring the right tools to them. And so like what Denise works on, and many of the tools that we work with the communities would be the same tools. So it's really trying to help from the other end of the spectrum, working with them to help them find their goals and their needs and bring those right tools to them.
I would certainly agree with what Denise and Laura have said. I work on the Dallas Sustainable Skylines Initiative, which is really kind of a very localized, place-based initiative, as Laura indicated, where energy, transportation, and climate are all very important in terms of the total mix of sustainability. You know, the city of Dallas was focusing on this issue before the Dallas Sustainable Skylines Initiative, but the initiative really has congealed a lot of those different programs into one focus. The city is a signatory of the Seattle Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. It is focused on energy efficiency in its own right and distributed generation. From a transportation standpoint, from a SIP standpoint, a state implementation plan standpoint, mobile sources are 2/3 of the problem in terms of NOx emissions in the Dallas area. So all these things together are a concern both of the local city of Dallas, but also of the DSSI.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Denise, can you tell me, I know that you have worked closely with Connecticut. What lessons have you learned from Connecticut that are applicable to the other programs that you've been working on?
Thanks, Jane. That's a good question. Our work with Connecticut really helped shape our investments as a program, because through our experiences with Connecticut, you know, they came to us and said, we are interested in evaluating the multiple benefits of our climate change mitigation strategy. We recognize that there are a whole host of folks that we believe should be supporting our efforts if only they knew what those multiple benefits were. And so we want to figure out ways and work with EPA to come up with those multiple benefits. And so our work with Connecticut really, you know, they helped us to identify, you know, what are the specific benefits that states, you know, need to put in their, you know, into their arsenal, and you know, what is it that's driving their decisions? You know, and for example, you know, jobs is a big one. You know, they may put forth a policy option, but the governor's going to come back and say, well, what does this do for jobs in the state? And they wanted to be ready to answer that type of question. Also, you know, just the how do I communicate the benefits? How do I communicate greenhouse gas emissions or climate change to people that don't ordinarily deal with this every day? So, through our work with Connecticut, we were really able to identify what are the specific benefits or the specific pieces of information or tools that they need to help them effectively integrate their air quality, climate change, and economic planning, as well as energy planning, and how can we help them, you know, with those tools. So what we did was we worked with them to identify the specific needs that they had, similar to what Laura was talking about. Then we could work together to shape our tools. COBRA was first the co-benefits risk assessment model, which I think both Gina and Julie and Leah Weiss mentioned in their presentations. You know, we really built that with Connecticut, or it was driven by their needs to come up with a tool that could help us quantify additional multiple benefits of these different climate change strategies. So, you know, they really helped us develop our tools, shape our tools, and then we've been able to apply those tools and our lessons learned with other states and with other localities. So it's really helped us figure out how to help, you know, other states and other localities. And now, you know, the tools are much more widely used, thanks in, you know, big part because of our work with Connecticut.
Laura, we're going to get to the questions also from the audience. This one is from New Jersey, and it's about sustainable skylines. And from a national perspective, is there a formula for the cost sharing of this initiative? How much has EPA contributed, and what is the local share?
That's a good question. We really don't have a set formula at this point. Right now, we've done just a few pilots. We've started with Dallas and Kansas City. In those cases, in Dallas, there was about $200,000 that EPA put in. Kansas City was about $100,000. And what the cost sharing is really depends on what's there at the local level. And I think it depends on what the the projects that the cities decide to do. It depends on what corporate sponsors are willing to put in. A good example in Dallas, if you don't mind me using your example, the city of Dallas had a pot of money there that they were going to do tree planting. But they really weren't sure how to do that and they were looking at dealing with heat island issues. And so part of what we put in a little money to do a study on where it would be most efficient to do tree plantings and how that would best address the heat island initiative. And then it leveraged that money that was there for doing, the tree planting. So it really is very city dependent. And project dependent, but what we really are looking for is a commitment by the community, commitment by our partners, and then our willing, we're going to be there to help with resources, tools, technical expertise to help keep the process moving and really act as the catalyst.
Great. And Jim, to build on that, we have a question from Texas. And the question is, are there any win-win strategies for greenhouse gas and air pollutants for transportation outside of reducing vehicle miles traveled?
Yeah, Jenny, sure, that's a great question. I think one of the projects on the Dallas Sustainable Skylines Initiative is a case in point, the Green Taxi Program, which the North Central Texas Council of Governments is championing. And we estimate that there are about 2,000 to 2,500 taxis in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Fortunately, and going back to what Laura commented on, we were able to get great support from an NGO, non-governmental organization in the Dallas area, as well as the Regional Transportation Council of the COG in committing almost $1.6 million to an incentivizing the conversion, essentially, of the taxi fleet from conventional vehicles to hybrid vehicles. And that's underway now. The COG has a proposal out for consideration for taxi companies and independent taxi drivers to get up to $4,000 to $5,000 in incentives to buy a used or new hybrid car. We estimate that that's going to significantly reduce NOx emissions from those cars that drive on an average of 60 to 80,000 miles a year and that idle a lot in heavy traffic, so they're disproportionate emitters, as well as over 20,000 tons a year of CO2. So there's an example of how a non-VMT reduction program can impact air quality in a positive way with vehicles.
And that leads to another question that comes to us today from Indiana. And this talks about what you were describing, Denise, with the way that states need to be able to talk about air pollution and climate and things we can learn about this. The question is, has the EPA done any modeling that would work in tandem with job creation and economic models that would forecast air quality under a rapid move away from combustion and the attached economic and health savings with the improved air quality?
That's a great question, Jenny. Thanks. EPA has certainly worked with state governments in particular and done some economic analysis that we've supported. And for example, Connecticut, Gina McCarthy mentioned that EPA had provided economic support or economic analysis support to them. And in that case, what they did was they took their climate change action plan and they themselves had identified what the air pollution benefits would be. They quantified the air emissions. And what EPA did was took those very same strategies and ran them through some economic models to come up with the jobs impact so that Connecticut could tell a more comprehensive story. What we're trying to do is sort of beef up the benefit side of the cost-benefit equation discussion. And so we supported economic analyses in the state of Connecticut for some of the measures that achieve both greenhouse gas and air pollution benefits. And we've done similar analyses in other states. We've done, and you can find actually the Connecticut reports are on their website where they have their Connecticut Climate Change Action Plan. There are economic analyses on their site that you can access. And we've done similar studies for the state of New York where we looked at the economic benefits and the jobs benefits of clean energy programs, energy efficiency, renewable energy in particular, which achieve both greenhouse gas as well as air pollution benefits. We've done it Connecticut, New York, and New Mexico as well. So certainly there are studies out there, and you can look to Connecticut's website for copies of their analyses that can demonstrate the job benefits the recommendations within their plan.
Were there any challenges to that, to creating those documents or doing those models that were surprising to you? Was there data that was missing, or was it really just a question of assembling things in a different way?
You know, there are data gaps. That's a really important question, and it's, you know, there's always a saying with modeling. It's, you know, whatever you put in, you know, determines the quality of what you put out. So certainly you want to have strong inputs. In Connecticut, we actually had very strong energy modeling results that we could feed into our economic models. So we were able to feel more confident on the results that came out of our economic models because we had very strong energy impact data going in. So that's one thing that states should consider, or localities should consider, is, you know, the energy the energy data is really important to try and get a handle on. So, you know, if you have sort of iffy or less confidence in your energy data, then, you know, that may affect the results of your economic analyses. Or, you know, essentially you want to be directionally in the right direction. But there are issues with gaps in data, and, you know, making assumptions about what you know, what's really involved in a particular policy. So, you know, there are things that you certainly can address through, you know, thoughtful planning and thoughtful discussion across agencies with respect to how you define your policy options and then how you want to analyze them.
Something else I'd like to ask each of you, and I know that Leah Weiss and Julie both talked about this, was the iterative process of, in both the modeling world and then also in the community world, of getting it right by talking to people and engaging your stakeholders. How have each of you, what kind of experience have you had in engaging your stakeholders? Tim, I know you're a seasoned EPA person, and based on your experience, how has this all come together?
You know, we kicked off the DSSI program back in really with a December 2006 meeting of stakeholders. About 60 stakeholders came to a 2-day meeting from the private sector, the public sector, the NGO sector, and we sat down and we asked them the simple question: if you had the resources necessary to do environmental improvement projects for the city of Dallas, in the city of Dallas, over the next 3 years, what would you do? And that group was very fertile in those 2 days and came up with 58 different ideas. So we heard them, and a subset of that group worked for 3 months to sort of winnow those 58 ideas down to 7 high priority projects, and those are the 7 projects that were featured in the film. So since that time, our major focus has been to interact with partners and potential partners, and to listen to them and to see how they can fit into these 7 projects or other related projects that have the commonality of furthering sustainability in the area.
I think that the sitting down and listening is the key, you know. But again, each city, each community is going to be a little bit different, and one of the keys that we find is you have to identify who the right player is. You know, and as we've gone around and talked about sustainable skylines, sometimes it's the city, sometimes it's the COG, the Council of Governments, sometimes it's a non-governmental organization. An example of that is there's a group in Indianapolis that is exploring project ideas that they were approaching the city with. So I think it's really important to be flexible to find out who the key players are and to listen to them, and then let them draw the right people into action on. You know, I don't think you can force the issue, and I don't think you can have a set formula.
Jim, do you think the Dallas project would have been successful if you had come in with, not you personally, but if EPA had come in with that list of 58, or?
No, not at all. I think it's essential that this be locally driven, and that's been one characteristic that we've tried to really try to emphasize, that EPA, as has been said earlier, is a catalyst, is a convener of stature, if you will, but we're definitely a junior partner. It's the City of Dallas, it's the North Central Texas COG, it's the private sector, and that's very important because all those groups are really challenged by high energy prices. They're challenged by continuing chronic air quality problems that need to be solved in a comprehensive way. And part of this effort is just getting out of our stovepipes, if you will, and looking at this in a multimedia kind of fashion. And when you listen to stakeholders, you find that they have some really novel and common sense ideas that we end up asking ourselves, why didn't we think of that ourselves?
And I think some of the value that we can bring is in working with the places that we have. When you go to a new area, there's similarities, and then you can make the connections between, the folks in Kansas City are interested in heat islands. We have experience in Dallas with heat islands. There's similarities that you can make the connections to, but it's still locally identified and locally driven.
And let me interrupt you there, because a caller from Kansas City has a question about ozone formation and heat island abatement, and I'll share it with you, Jim, if that's okay. How strong is our understanding about the relationship between ozone formation and urban heat island abatement?
Great question. I think a good reference is the work that Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Lab has done, both in Los Angeles and other cities, including Houston. The Houston work was actually partially funded by EPA. It depends upon the city. I think, if I remember the LBNL report from LA accurately, there was more of a direct relationship concluded there between urban heat island and ozone formation. And Houston was a little bit more nuanced. We looked there at several general mitigation measures that could be applied, including tree planting, including reflective roofs and reflective pavements. It seemed to be, although trees were positive, ironically, it wasn't as much of a benefit as pavements or roofs, simply because they tended to result in lower ambient temperatures. It tended to trap pollutants closer to the ground. So it does vary based upon the city, but in general, the urban heat island effect can increase the photochemical activity in an urban area.
Denise, I have one for you. Oh,
and actually, if I could just build on
sure.
that, I just wanted to encourage the caller or contact from Kansas City that we have just revamped the EPA heat island reduction website. So there is, you can go to www.epa.gov/HIRI, and you can find out certainly more information about the benefits and the different options related to heat island reduction.
That's HIRI.
HIRI. So.
If I could build on that build-up also, I think another benefit of mitigating the urban heat island is to reduce the overall cooling demand in cities. If you're reducing even the sort of microclimate where buildings have to be cooled, then you're decreasing the energy demand from that building, which reduces emissions from power plants that supply electricity to those buildings. So that's an ancillary effect, I think.
And one other resource, I'm sorry, we're all going to jump in and add on to everybody else. One other resource is the U.S. Forest Service has developed a survey tool and a model that people can use to identify what their current amount and type and quality of green cover, their basal area cover, the tree cover in the area, and the impact on that cover on ozone and PM formation. And it sets up the baseline for their tool, but it can also serve as a planning tool. And the model is called APTI, and I honestly can't remember the link, so I will have to, that would be one of our follow-up items to get a good link for folks for that.
Okay. Well, we're coming to the end of our broadcast, so I just want to have one more question here for you, Laura. This is from Fond du Lac, and it is in Minnesota. And how much growth can the U.S. and the world, for that matter, sustain? Will anyone address the hard questions regarding carrying capacity and sustainability?
That's a really good question, and I think that's really the underlying question here, and I don't think anybody has the answer. But I think one of the answers draws from Native American philosophy and culture. And since this is from Fond du Lac, I'll just point this out that, when the Native Americans look at making their decisions, they look to how those decisions are going to impact the 7 generations to come. And so unless we start thinking about that and changing the way we behave and the way that we consume and the way that we work within our environments and our communities. And we as regulators and federal government employees as well bring those resources and those intentions to bear, then we're not going to know what that, we're not going to stop dealing with the sustainability issues. So I think it's important that we move forward in thinking about sustainability, land use, energy, transportation, planning, and looking and making our decisions for that 7 generations to come.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank our panelists, Jim Yarborough, Laura McKelvey, and Denise Mulholland for being with us today, as well as the audience for joining us. And I'd like to let you know that we're going to have another broadcast on December 9th on the lead NAC, so please join us for that. And also, the show is going to be archived on the web and be available on EPA's website. That website, which you've seen already, is www.epa.gov/APTI. And it also contains all of the slides that you've seen in today's presentation, and they are available for downloading. So for more information, please visit the website on the screen, as well as the websites that are about to be listed at the conclusion of this broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been Jenny Noonan with the Climate and Air Quality broadcast. Thank you.